Hi folks, Josh Knight the First here with another episode of Writer Rebuild, coming to you with episode 29 of the series. Let's get right into it. So this week on Kamen Rider Build, we have hit a major turning point. Now, not only is the story getting more serious, but we've got a new opening, and now it's more reflective of the changes that we've seen in the series. We don't see as much of the nice imagery from the beginning of the series, but we do see some things replaced. We see Misora there as Mitan, we now see Kazumi there in the opening, and now we're reflective of Bloodstark being the definite bad guy. Now, if this had been the first thing you see in this episode, that would have been all well and good, and that would be completely fine, and that would maybe lull you into a nice sense of security going into this episode, but really that's not actually what happens. We get that later on. The story just starts right away here for this particular episode. So as opposed to the last couple of weeks where we've seen this kind of funny narration at the opening of the episode kind of telling you the story for what you're going to see that week, here we see that Nanba / Mido is directing his own orchestra to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, Ode to Joy as most people know it, which is going to be the background for these terrible events that are about to occur. Bloodstark has finally gotten what he wants. He's gotten enough bottles to activate one of the panels on Pandora's box and reattach it. What that results in is something massive, literally massive. We see that kind of like Walrose in Attack on Titan, the skywall is changing and forming its own kind of inner barrier. Now, as a result of this, the displacement around the skywall is resulting in a lot of people dying, a lot of people getting pushed out of the way of this growing massive thing, and as such, war is breaking out at the same time because Saito has decided to attack Toto. But they shouldn't be, because war should be over, right? Unfortunately not, and there's going to be a lot of talking points in this episode, and I'll try to address them as quickly as I possibly can because I don't want to take up too much time. But the first thing I want to address is the fact that Nanba, masquerading as Mido, has decided to go ahead and declare more active war against Toto. Why? Because of plausible deniability. Nanba's plan for the last proxy battle was a complete setup. They decided to make sure that this time, which is something I didn't really catch in the first viewing, this time for the proxy battle, they made sure that it wasn't televised. We all remember that the first battle between Grease and Build was televised, and people all over Japan were watching it. This time, only the representatives were watching, meaning if anything happened, they could plausibly deny what the outcome was, which is exactly what Nanba intended. The first thing Nanba made sure to do was make sure that there was no one else watching the battle. The second thing that he made sure to do was control the narrative in the media. That way the public could go ahead and say that they were doing the wrong thing. Specifically, Toto was doing the wrong thing here. It's all about making sure you've got all your bases covered and making the other person look like the bad guy. Now that for all intents and purposes Nanba is the head of Saito, he's using that power to go ahead and declare war and lie and take control of the narrative, saying that, oh, they didn't actually win, we won, they're attacking us, why aren't they giving up their lands? You see, this idea of controlling the narrative is very important when it comes to politics and sometimes acting out military aggression, which is exactly what Nanba thinks is the right thing to do. Now, I commented a little bit last week on the kind of mindset that Nanba represents here. It's kind of a very Western, warlord-minded place to come from, and I'm very interested that this is the kind of person who's in charge there, who's in charge of a whole side of a country. Now, in all of this, Nanba shows that he has no care for human lives, no care for any lives lost during the growth of the Skywall, or showing off the military might of Saito, but I do think this will come at a cost to him. We see later on in the episode that he's deciding to go ahead, for vanity's sake I assume, to face swap back and forth with the help of Bloodstark to talk as the original actor, and then switch back to masquerading as Mido. But it seems, at least to me, that this is taking some sort of toll on his health. He's talking a little more slowly, a little more stressed. I think that a possible reason for this is that with the face swapping, it might actually physically take a toll on a person. If it happens once, yeah, you could probably get over it. But if he's forcing Bloodstark to go ahead and do this constantly, maybe this will shorten his lifespan. Hopefully. Now, the other very important thing we learn is that this new formation of the Skywall is being referred to as Pandora's Tower. Now, the fact that Bloodstark knows this should be very telling. He says that once this starts occurring, this will end up resulting in the same fate of Mars happening here on Earth. Now, the bigger question here is why on Earth would Bloodstark actually want this? Now, we'll get more into what I think about Pandora's Tower and what exactly is going on with Bloodstark later on, but I do want to go ahead and talk about what exactly this means that essentially Nanba has tied the hands of our fellow heroes politically. Now, a good chunk of the motivation for this episode is the fact that because their hands are tied politically, our heroes can't exactly do the job they're supposed to do. The idea that Hokuto is still under the control of Sato because of these lies infuriates Sawatari, and for good reason. He's got people he cares for over there, and he mentions that as much. And of course, Ryuga, being as hot-headed as he is, sides with him. He wants to protect the people that he sees in danger right in front of him, and there's nothing wrong with that. The real dilemma is represented in Sento. Sento realizes, and of course Misora backs him on this, is that because there's political ideas in mind, they can't exactly do whatever they want. If Sento and the crew step into Hokuto to essentially do what most people would agree is the right thing, Sato would use that as a form of aggression on their part, and they could take military action against Hokuto, and that's not what they want. They don't want anybody else getting involved in the crossfire, and Sento goes ahead and tells them as much. The idea is that Sento is trying to be represented as the pragmatic hero. He knows that there's a cost to every action, kind of that every action has an opposite but equal reaction, bringing back the science portion of this episode and his character. Now, in order to go ahead and talk some sense into everybody, Sento decides to think of a way to fight in a new manner, not in the way that they're used to, because of course they're fighting a battle that isn't being held under normal means, because the rules are being manipulated by Nanba. Now, for whatever reason, he decides to ask the Prime Minister for a doll arc, and then we never actually pick that up again. It's just weird that they threw that in, and hopefully we'll get back to that next week. But we do see that Ryuga goes to talk to Sawatari about his feelings about the battle, but while that's happening, we see that Misora, as Mitan, decides to have a stream directly aimed at Sawatari. In her very Mitan cutesy style, she decides to go ahead and tell him that even though protecting people is important and the right thing to do, he needs to protect himself. It's the idea that you have to protect your own life first and value it before you can value somebody else's. And the idea of that is very strong in two ways. The first way being that as somebody who's a soldier, Sawatari doesn't exactly know how to take care of himself. His idea, of course, has always been for the other people, for the Hokuto trio, for the people who worked on his farm, and that of course is a good thing to see in one of your main characters. The second thing I want to talk about is actually Misora as Mitan using her position as a streamer to get across something positive. We see that Sawatari sees her as a form of entertainment and that everybody loves her and watches her streams all the time. He used to do it with his boys back in the field. But the idea is that Misora sees her position and sees that she can do something positive with it. It's not just the kitschy sort of thing of, hey, help us find the monster from the beginning of the series. We see that she's actually trying to move positively forward, giving out a message to people that would actually improve their lives. Now, as a lot of you probably know, here in this day and age, streaming is very important, and people see these positions and the people who do them on a bit of a higher pedestal. So seeing that they're showing somebody who has this position and is using that to get across a message to help people is very reassuring, both here in the States and over there in Japan. Now, immediately after this, we see that we're getting into a fight here with Grease and Cross versus the Hell Brothers, Bloodstark, and two Hard Guardians. Now, the Hard Guardians I didn't quite mention at the beginning of the episode, but there are these new weapons that are being employed by Nanba Heavy Industries. They take a little longer to take out, but they can still be defeated by our crew. I do appreciate in this last fight, this extended fight, that we see an uptick in the level of the choreography, which is something I've been commenting on for the last several weeks. Here I see that there's been a lot more care taken, really not just here but in the overall episode, but I do appreciate that in a Kamen Rider show I like the fight. I do also see a carryover from their sister show Lupin Ranger vs. Patch Ranger, in that we see kind of an interesting first-person view there with Sawatari and then going to zoom out for the rest of the battle. I wonder if we're going to see any more of that here in the show. Now, when it does seem our heroes have the upper hand, Bloodstark again proves that he's a jerk and pulls out a power that he hasn't shown before, this kind of weird red beam coming out of his hand. I do appreciate that Ryuga quickly makes the connection that this is most likely Martian power. Now, we don't see much more of it here in this episode, but I think we're going to see a lot more of these Martian portions of the story come into play over the next couple of weeks, really going all the way to the end of the story. Now, when Sento finally does join the battle as Build, he makes a speech about why he's doing everything he's doing, again mentioning that he wants to find a way to fight in a different way, because again, this is different circumstances that he's having to deal with. But the bigger portion that he wants to get across is that he doesn't want any more lives lost, whether it's friend or foe. This speech is actually what finally connects with Sawatari, and the two finally agree on the same level to fight alongside one another to end the war as quickly as possible. This leads into a sequence which actually really moved me to tears actually upon second and third viewing. Yes, I had to watch this several times. We see that Sawatari decides to use the 3 bottles of his fallen comrades in battle against Bloodstark and the Hell Brothers, and in doing that we see kind of this idea, projection, however you want to call it, of Sento and Sawatari fighting alongside each other, but we see them gently being pushed forward by the Hokuto trio, showing their support for them. Now, having done a project where something similar was shown, you see fallen heroes come back to support your main heroes, and their beliefs really touched me, and I think it touched a lot of people watching this. And I appreciate that's what got across, the power of friendship, the power of support that helped them finally defeat Hell Brothers. They're not gone for good, but at least it backed him off a little bit. Now, as we've seen for basically the whole series, anybody working with Nanba Heavy Industries doesn't play by the rules, they play dirty. So we see that one of the Hell Brothers has Misora as a temporary hostage, even though she was there to go ahead and support Sawatari in his own way and give him those handshake tickets. But thankfully that only lasted so long because her other personality came out. That personality we now know is the Queen of Mars, Vernage. And what she's actually capable of, we don't know yet. We'll actually find out about that next week, and we see that Ryuga will finally get back the old cross suit, which I actually like a lot more, and we find that he's actually the last hope. A little bit wizard much? Really, this episode was a mile a minute. Most of the action, most of the story is very well told, and a lot of the major things that happen in the first 5 minutes just to set everything up, which is pretty ambitious for a show like this. Now, getting back to Bloodstark and the way he's going about things, I don't understand entirely why he's doing all this, why he would want what would potentially lead to the destruction of Earth. Until I really thought about it and then it clicked for me, he's probably not the person that we think he is. In fact, I probably think that he's not the species we think he is. The new theory that I have is that Bloodstark is actually Martian. The person that we did know as Isurugi was probably killed on Mars and then replaced by somebody who could do the smoke technique and now has come to Earth to take over Earth or destroy it. That would make sense in terms of everything that they're trying to do, how they don't really care about their supposed daughter or what means they have to go to achieve their goal. Much the same, I really appreciate how the politics are actually playing into this, how the hero actually takes that into account and they're not just blindly fighting. We do see that represented in Ryuga and Sawatari, but not so much in Sento. I appreciate that the hero knows what he's getting himself into and actually hesitates before jumping into battle, and once he does know what he's fighting for, he jumps right in as he should. And again, in just so many scenes, we see Misora really showing her chops as an actress. I really love the work she's doing here, and really I want to see a lot of her work once the series is over. But those, of course, are my thoughts on the episode. I want to hear what you guys thought in the comments below, so let's go ahead and talk about a few things. First off, Bloodstark. With all of the stuff happening now and the arrival of Pandora's Tower, do you think it's possible that Bloodstark is actually a Martian? Secondly, the politics, specifically as they relate to Nanba. Because Nanba isn't playing by the rules and skirts around the truth, do you think that gives wiggle room for the heroes to act in different ways, maybe ways that they shouldn't, in retaliation? And thirdly, Mitan. Because she was able to use her position to get across a positive message, what's an example of a streamer you guys saw that actually made you guys feel better about your life or something that you were thinking about? You tell me in the comments below. And of course, during the week, you can always talk to me over on social media. On Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been episode 29 of Writer Rebuild. For episode 29 of the series, The Opening Bell Rings. I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next episode.